crafty friends, here I am again with another video. I picked up a paper pad. This is by Stamperia, and I picked it up from Nancy at Stamp Art in London, Ontario, Canada. By far one of my favorite independent card making shops, and she puts a lot of attention into the products that she picks and brings into the shop, including these beautiful papers. If you ever get a chance to go, it's absolutely worth the trip in London, Ontario. Anyways, this pad was stunning. Absolutely loved the images, and the only thing was there was one of each sheet and it was two-sided, so it was a little hard to pick, but I think I picked out the best of the best for what I liked and got some pretty good cards made, and here's my first card. Now, also a first card, down on the bottom right hand side is the very first card my Auntie Gwen has ever made. It's my birthday card, and I wanted to say thank you so much to her. She's one of my biggest supporters when it comes to my crafting, and I think it's just awesome that she made a card. So I just used a Neat and Tangled die, and now I'm going to use the Happy Birthday sentiment from Stampendous here. I'm inking it up in Versamark ink, and I'm going to use just a silver embossing powder to emboss that and bring that to life. And now that I have that done, I've got a piece of vellum here that was in my stash. It's flocked, and thought it would be a nice accompaniment to this particular picture. I also have a glitter piece of cardstock here and some craft cardstock. Down at the bottom there is my birthday card from one of my best friends, Kathy Posey, thank you. And I'm applying some foam to this. This is that packing foam sheeting that I keep recommending that you don't throw out. Reuse. It's awesome, lightweight, and most often free. Sticks really well if you're going to use glue runner, and I haven't tested it yet to tell you guys whether regular liquid glue works or not with it, but I will get onto it. I do know it mails extremely well. I have tested that and can verify it. So I'm just going to get this set onto this backing, or set it onto the vellum here. Oh my gosh, I'm getting tongue-tied. And I've got that extra piece, and I'm just going to square that up on my 5x7 card base here. And you can tell how old this glitter sheet is because it's kind of separating. It actually was a sticky glitter sheet, and gosh, it's probably been in my stash for 7 or 8 years. Still glittery, still works. Just gonna put a little glue on here, a little bit of glossy accents, and stick that baby down. Of course, I've fast-tracked my finger holding here. I had to hold it a lot longer than that. And this is that Neat and Tangled Celebrate sentiment. It's layered with some vellum, and that is some multi-matte medium that I'm sticking it down with. I'm also going to use some pumice stone distress ink and one of those little brushes. I used it in a previous video. It's just a cheap makeup brush from the dollar store, and I just wanted to put a shadow around that sentiment to get it to show up a little bit more. Maybe I didn't have to do that, but you know, it looked like it was kind of hidden at the time I did it. So anyways, I gave that a little bit of a polish, and that finishes card number 1. Oh, I also added some little brads there too. Card number 2. So this was a fun but fiddly card, and I'm quite certain there's probably a video on the internet for how to pleat ribbon better than what I did. But this is just a salvage piece of ribbon, and it was on a big gift basket that I got a few years back. I hung on to it, of course, and it just seemed to really speak to me when it came to these papers and this style of cards. So I figured this out, that if you tack down the first part of the ribbon and get that squared away on a decent piece of cardstock, you can make your pleats here. And what I'm doing is I'm also adding a little bit of that foam again, and I'm just going to sneak that in between the two kind of layers, or between the flaps of the ribbon there, just to give it a little bit more volume so it stands up a bit. I don't know, it seems funny wanting dimensioning your ribbon too, but that's what I'm going for. And then I'm just going to put a little piece of two-sided tape here and stick that down to keep this all lined up. And of course, that's my reverse tweezers there. That's a godsend when you're trying to do this. So anyways, this is where it got kind of fiddly, and I'm sure somebody has a video online how to do this a lot more easily than I did. I think Vicky Pampiano, I don't know, Vicky, she's an awesome crafter. She's not hard to find. If you put Vicky P in, you'll find her on YouTube. So anyways, I think she did something similar to this and possibly has a better technique than the one that I was fumbling around with here. But regardless, get a couple pleats in there and put some foam tape in, and then also add some tape to the backs of your flaps to help hold them in place. And then once I pull that final piece of tape up, I now have that secured onto the back of this piece of cardstock. Now I'm taking tape runner and I'm running it down the length of the ribbon and also on the length of the cardstock, and then that way I can line it up here on my card base. Again, it's a 5x7 card base. And or actually it's a card face that I'm going to be putting on my card base, and I'm just going to flip these tabs around, and then I also am going to layer on another piece of ribbon here. This is a dotted piece of ribbon. Sorry, I got a little out of focus there. And I'm just going to put some tape runner on that, and once I get it situated here, it sticks extremely well to this piece of ribbon. And this is just a dollar store piece of ribbon from, well, we have Dollarama in Canada, but I always check to see what kind of ribbon is available at the dollar store. So again, take a little bit of foam, shipping foam, and I've got a layer on each portion here. And what I realized is once I dry fit that to my card, the ribbon itself takes up enough space that I needed to take the foam away from the lower part of kind of my focal image here. So I removed that just to help give it some clearance, and I'm going to secure that into place. I'm inking up this Brutus Monroe Miss You sentiment. It's a Sharon script is what it's called, and I'm putting this on a little piece of vellum here, and that's Versamark Onyx Black with some clear embossing powder over top. I'm going to give that a little heat up and just get it set. And I'm going to trim that down just to make a very thin strip going over top of the image here with my Tim Holtz tonic cutter. I'm so glad I got this. I've got so many cutters, but this one's been amazing. And I'm just gonna tuck this underneath here. I've kind of peeled it up a little bit, and I'm just using a stylus to score a line down the side so I know where it's gonna tuck in neatly. I'm gonna cut a little bit of the extra off, put some two-sided tape under here to make sure that that side grabs adequately well, and I'll pull that back and sneak it in. And I have some really nice crystal rhinestones here, and I'm just going to spread those around and just give it a little bit of bling. It looks like one of those cards that needs some bling. Get those secured, and with some ATG on the back of this, I'm going to attach it to my 5x7 card base, and that is that card completed. And card number 3, so I used this Stephanie Bernard frame, and boy, what a mess this ended up being. This is one of my sheets that is actually wrapping paper on, gold wrapping paper on one of my sticker sheets. And that was also from a previous video, but you will see me regularly do that. And I've got these frames lined up, and I thought that they would look nice over top of this image. And I got myself going and started to put the ATG on, and thought, oh, that's gonna make it hard to put the sentiment on. So I just took some scrap backer tape here, or tape backer, and put it on to help cover the sentiment. Boy, I got flustered when I was doing this card, and you can see I'm twisting this around and thinking, how am I gonna get the sentiment on this? It's not lining up. And finally I figured it out. I thought I better mark it in case I had to set it back down again. So this is just some Post-it tape, and there's a Stampendous sentiment, Thinking of You, that I was grabbing, and I lost my footage. So let's start this again. I picked a different sentiment, or a different image this time, and decided that I would not emboss my sentiment directly to the frame, because this frame was a little too busy, and it's the same gold wrapping paper that I'm using here. And I'm going to put some foam tape on, but this foam tape's too wide, so I'm just taking one of my backer sheets from the U-line stickers, the ones that I said save but don't hoard like I do. And I'm just cutting this in half so that I can get it down the thin strips here and give them some dimension. So I'm just going to put those down the skinny sides and trim it off. And then I'll pull the other piece off here and also fortify the other skinny side and give it a little trim. And now I can go ahead and use just my regular width of dollar store foam tape. So that's why I have to cut it down, is because the dollar store does not give you a selection of home hardware section foam tape. So I'm also going to take that salvaged piece of sticker backing, and I'm going to use that so that I can go ahead and get this image piece situated. And I just firmly press down the foam tape, and I'm ripping off the protective backing, and that way I can line this up and stick it down. And I'm not going to go ahead and stick it to my workspace here. And of course, once I flipped it over and saw the image that I had kind of sacrificed in doing this, boy was I bummed. I thought, oh, I love that dragonfly, but what is it when you're trying to record a video? You lose your words big time. Anyways, that's my card base, and since the foam tape already has adhesive on it, I just add a little extra foam tape or a little extra adhesive in the middle part. And I have one of those gold wrapping paper, punched out a circle and punched out just a white paper circle for my sentiment and embossed that in gold. And I had an old burlap ribbon that I've been basically stealing the burlap threads, would that be the right thing, from, and my reverse tweezers, I'm sticking those through the hole, and if you give them a squeeze, it'll open them up enough that you can put the thread in to be able to pull that through. And I'm also going to try using my reverse tweezers to tie a bit of a bow here. I think I do a halfway decent job with this, but anyways, I adjusted it off screen, and now I'm going to add some foam tape. And of course, lining this up was a little difficult, and I just thought, well, if I stick it in place first and then put my sentiment over top, that'll help a lot. And then I cut the little flappy piece off, and I'm going to add another piece just to make sure that it's got support in the corner there, and get that peeled off and situated into place. And that's also from, that sentiment's also from the Stampendous set. It's Have a Happy Day. So just trim off my little tails here from my bow, and then I'm gonna use that same trick again where I just grab a little piece of ATG and make myself my own glue dot. I'm gonna twist that down around my stylus and put that underneath my bow to secure it. And this is, in a previous video I had, oh, those were eyeballs that I made. In a previous video I had made some embellishments, and I'm just using those here to put a little extra bling on my card. So, and that's using the gold ones. And I did finish off the other card, and I thought I'd show you anyways, of course, having lost the footage, but you get the idea. So this is card number 3. I'm just ripping off the edges of this image here. Now, I also had aged the image that you see laying on the table there, and never thought to videotape how I aged it. And so I'm using some pumice stone ink and just a sponge, not one of the flat blenders. I just fold it in half, and I just want to catch a little bit of color on the folds in the paper after I crumple it, because it just makes it look worn out and like it's been kicking around for a while. And the nice thing too is that you can actually take and pick where you want that, because I didn't want to go over top of the floral image to age that. I just wanted to basically hit the areas that were kind of in the white space to give it a little added interest. So once I flatten that out, I'm also going to take ice spruce and just go over those areas just to kind of darken them up a bit, and again give a little bit more interest. And so there you see my technique for aging wrinkled up paper or crunched up paper. And I have these are punched out of typewriter paper or printer paper, I guess, and this is a Martha Stewart punch. And if you actually take and you punch strips out, with typewriter paper, and then you crumple them all up, they actually end up having this kind of really funky lace-like appearance. So I'm just taking those and I'm putting that around the edge of a little piece that I cut that fits behind my image here, and I'm going to put a whole whack of ATG and a piece of my shipping foam down, and just double check that and make sure it all fits together. And then I'm also going to put lots and lots of ATG on my image, and I'm going to get that settled into place and stick it down really well. And so the other thing too is I wanted this craft cardstock to have some texture to it. So I gave it a spray, and I'm going to send it through with a piece of burlap and a folded over piece of packing foam. And once I ran that through, voila, who needs an embossing folder? You just use what you got kicking around. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of heat now. And I'm also going to go over it with a tiny bit of Memento Luxe Rich Cocoa and kind of age it up a little bit. And so my other sneaky technique that I use is I also use this burlap for stamping. So as long as it's a little moist, I've got this Anna Griffin chocolate pigment dye ink, and I pick it up with the burlap, and then I'm actually stamping it down onto the paper like a burlap stamp. It actually works really good, surprisingly. So it's just adding to the texture and the finish of the paper, and gives it a little bit of uniqueness. There you can see what I've actually achieved with it. And so this is the sentiment that I'm using, Miss You, from the Stampenda stamp set, on one of my little homemade blocks that maybe I'll do a tutorial on that. Martha Stewart Heart Punch, and that's just Nina Solar White cardstock, punching that out. And once I punched it out, I thought, gee, it looks really white. So I'm just gonna give it a little extra ink on the edges and age it up. And the other thing I decided to do was to tear the edges of my paper here, and I'm just going to ink up the ripped portion a little bit, just give it a little more character, really beating this up to make it look like a country style lacy card. And you're just gonna put a bunch of ATG on this, and this is how I line my cardstock up to put it on my card base, because I want to make sure that I've got even margins on either side. And then I'm just going to take those edges and give them a little bit of a curl, and do it on both edges. And then once I noticed that there was white peeking through, I thought, oh, I'll just throw a little bit of ink over that as well and just blend it in so it's not so visible. And there's my central image, and a bunch of ATG to hold that sucker down good. And get that in place, give it a good stick down. And I had a few elements. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. I kind of kept placing them together, and I don't know, sometimes things seem like a good idea and then you're not really certain what to do with them. But I'm going to take a little piece of ATG and take these two little tags. These actually came from the bead section at Michael's, and they were on clearance, so I grabbed them. And I'm just going to stick those together, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to use this antique button and a little bit of that twine or what I was going to do. And finally I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this sentiment and I'm going to stick that little charm and some foam tape to the sentiment with my look at how dirty those scissors are. Oh my gosh, isn't that terrible? So I just ripped it. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who does that. But now you've all found me out. Oh my goodness, filthy, dirty, nasty scissors. So I get this stuck on with a little bit of ATG, and now I'm going to put some glossy accents just to make sure that that string's going to stay put. And I'm also going to, oh, here's a burlap string bow that I thought might work. And I thought I'd leave it in because, of course, you know, when you see people make things, you wonder, how did they come to that decision? And this is what I do, is I kind of move things around and place things and hold things over top and just try to see what works. And sometimes, you know, a layout finally speaks to me and I go, wow, that's it. So after putting a little glossy accents underneath those two little charms to hold them in place, I'm going to add some glossy accents to my sentiment to make it look like it's a unique little piece of the whole thing. And that's that card finished there. So this is card number 5. This is a new thanks die I got from Nancy's store, and this is a Hero Art Hero Arts Thanks die. Those are some Post-it notes and Post-it stickers, and Aileen's foam craft glue, which stays sticky even when it's dry. And so what I do is I put these on the Post-its to make sure that it doesn't squeeze through to the other side. And that way it's only sticky on the back of my sentiment, because otherwise when I did it on a plain piece of paper, it got sticky everywhere. So I'm just going to start to layer these up and get them all stuck together. And I've got a few layers, 3 layers of 110-pound cardstock. That's why those look so stiff. That's 3 layers stuck together. And I have some black glossy cardstock paper and some just regular black paper. And I'm just going to burnish that with my bone folder to make sure it's really well stuck together. And of course, gently peeling this off to make sure I don't rip it up. And there, I've dry fitted on my card to check it out, and I'm using some foam, but what I'm doing here is with the shipping foam, I'm only putting it on one side of each piece of cardstock, and the one piece I'm building up with a double layer, and that's where my image is. I'm just going to trim that off and make sure that it has some more ATG on it. You can see it's thick there. And I'm just going to put a little bit of Versamark ink down the side here just to give that some definition, and I'm going to stick that down again to the salvage piece so that it doesn't stick as I'm trying to line this up. And now I'm taking my little sewing tool here to make sure that this piece is straight. Checking my white space, and now I'm going to firm that down. And as you can see, I've got it flush on one side and raised on the other, and then this particular piece of paper also has the same thing going on, where that spine edge of my card is flat to the paper, flush, and raised with 2 layers of foam as I stick it down. So it gives this kind of stacked look. And so I'm just taking my sentiment here, and to make sure that I can put it back in the same spot, I put a little bit of Post-it tape down, and I'm using some multi-medium matte and gonna try and really carefully stick this down. Give it a little bit of poking into place, and then I'm going to take some stamp blocks, a big stamp block and a smaller stamp block, and stick that down. So this is a trick that I use when I'm not entirely certain where I want my sentiment to go, and I kind of guessed that I maybe wanted it there, but I didn't want to permanently stamp it onto my card. So I'm just stamping it onto a matching piece of paper, and I'm just going to move that around so I can see where it would look good. And after moving it around a bunch of times, I finally went, that far corner looks best. So I'm just lining up the flow of the text with the thanks image and stamping down my friend in Versamark Onyx Black ink. And I'm also going to put a little clear embossing powder over top of that because the thanks die cut is shiny. Heat that up and get that set. And I'm going back to some of my homemade embellishments, and I've picked off a little heart and a few little dots here. And those are just made with glossy accents and any type of punched out metallic paper that you might have, and using that foam glue that stays sticky once it's dry. And I've got those all stuck on there, and now I'm going to stick that to my card base. And that's card number 5. I'd also like to give credit where credit is due. The idea of putting the embossing powder in the drawer is from Tina Smith at Cards and Coffee Time. That has been a major time saver. Bravo, Tina, great idea. As well, I'd like to say a big thank you to Mary Polenko for being an early supporter of mine and making me feel like I could really do this. Thank you so much, Mary, as well as Monica Morgan and Georgia Papercrafts. You guys are awesome. If you're new to YouTube and you're looking for supporters, leave a comment on my channel. I'm more than happy to return the love. As well, if you haven't subscribed, please do, or give me a thumbs up. Let me know I'm still doing okay, and have a great day. Thank you very much. I'm Sharon Luska, and I'll see you soon.